What up, y'all? Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. I am here with Minhaj. How you doing, man?
Great. Walaikum assalam. What's up?
MashaAllah. Hey, it's always the same, right? It's always the same. Minhaj, man. So we met, man. When did we meet? We met on Twitter, wasn't it? Wasn't it Twitter? I think it was Twitter.
Yes. Actually, I was kind of chasing you almost. You get busy and
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
It was a while before I actually got you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I stay busy these days. Even today, it's like we were supposed to like start a little bit earlier and I just been so ragged, running myself ragged these past couple days. I'm writing a new guide. I'm working on like, some stuff I've never done before, so I'm like doing so much research, printing stuff out. Whew. Lamastan. It's been tough, but here I am.
It's really interesting, actually, the kind of work you're doing. I was briefly in your show with Brother Jibril the other day. It's really interesting, the kind of conversations that you're having. And I think it's adding a lot of value to the discussion that we have, specifically the fun and humor that you bring to the conversations that they get about you.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. I'm trying to go for some independence out here in Europe. It's rough to be. It's not impossible, but I think it's rough to actually work in like the regular civilian environment here in Germany or in Europe in general, except for maybe the UK. The UK is an exception, and then actually practice your Islam. I find it very difficult, because when you're breaking away for Salah and all this stuff, the people in the environment here, they're more forgiving and excusing of like 10 smoke breaks than they are of one Salah break, So, and you're like, hey, man, I took some time off. I prayed for like 5 minutes. These guys have been going on like 15, 20 smoke breaks for 5 minutes each pop. It's like, what are you looking at me crazy for? So, I think if you're going to be in Europe, then you really need to look at self-sufficiency as best as possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally get you. And I remember my time in Germany, and I guess it's not very different in Sweden, in the sense that these are taking coffee breaks and just walk around and just too tired, and then someone takes a break for Salah, and what's going on? And don't you like to work, or are you out of your mind or something? These kind of looks. So I totally get it. And that was already like I left Europe 8 years ago. I think it must have become worse these days.
Actually, I would say, I've been in Germany a total of 31 years. Not back to back, but just a total, living on and off. And I think it's actually gotten better in it because you can't go to a single major city or the connected, surrounding cities and not find Muslims everywhere. There are like Syrians and all sorts of, just people. They're all over the place now. So now it's actually becoming part of the culture. I'm actually meeting like apprentices. Syrian apprentices for like electricians, plumbers, this, that, the other, because I'm doing technical construction installations ever since the Rona came on. And, it's really nice. It's good money, everything. There's just constant bombarded work. And it's really odd to see because these are things that usually German youth do. But German youth are, they're looking to be bankers and whatever else and big money makers, even though this is big money in construction. And it's like it's being overrun. Now, I wouldn't say overrun. I don't see it as a negative thing, but. So I think it's becoming more commonplace, actually, and more accepted, but albeit slowly.
Yeah, I think in 2015, I've seen a lot of demographics in Germany also. Because I remember, last time I was aware, it was really weird because police would actually line up outside the Friday Fair and see, if someone's illegal because, apparently that was the hottest place to find people who have ran out of their visa or something like that. But recently, I've been hearing good news. You're just telling me that there are a lot of Muslim communities springing. I remember there were some really nice food places in Frankfurt. So enjoy that.
Yeah.
So, Craig, that's your real name, right?
You can call me Abdurrahman. It's preferred.
Okay. So I didn't know that one. I mean, probably you should update that on your website.
Probably.
So, yeah. So, since we've been talking about a lot of things that have recently been developing, both in terms of Western Muslims and predominantly Muslim countries, Southeast Asia and the Middle East, One of the things that really inspired me to contact you and talk to you about is that your unapologetic stance on what you really believe in. For example, I know of very few people. I think I have more fingers than I can count for people who would proudly and claim that they're polygamous. And I think where you're living, it's almost sacrilegious. So that's something that takes guts. It takes a lot of guts to actually be able to talk about that. And a lot of criticism leveled at you. What I believe that they either don't know you or they don't know your story, because you're someone who's been there, who's done that. You've seen both sides of the pictures. You've been in Qatar and Saudi Arabia also, I believe.
Yeah, I lived all over the Middle East actually, but yeah, Qatar and Saudi Arabia are the two primary places where I stayed the longest. Yeah.
Okay, and you definitely know more about Western world than anyone in terms of Islamic expansion and their customs and traditions, and how the whole marriage thing works. Tell us a little bit about you for our audience watching in the moment, what you have done and what you primarily do.
Well, I mean, it's actually not that spectacular in terms of just who I am. I pretty much put it on my website. American or Muslim American. I put Islam first. I've been Muslim since 1998, and I came from like strong Christian beliefs, even though my family wasn't. I mean, my mother was, she was Roman Catholic. This just has a reason, so I'm going to go over it all. And I had strong Christian beliefs, but I didn't find Catholicism to be it. And then I started looking around, and I found Islam and the Tawheed of Allah, and putting the prophets and the messengers in the proper place. Because to me, as a Christian, the whole Trinity and all that stuff didn't make sense, and so that's why I became Muslim, because it put the prophets and the messengers, Jibril and the Malaika and all of this in the proper order and proper places, and it made perfect sense to me. And it appealed not only to my spiritual side, but also to my rational mind, because we know the two aren't necessarily always connected, but this connected it all. So I was like, alhamdulillah, I became Muslim. And what, polygyny is something that I guess you could say I always practiced, even prior to Islam. I've always been a man that had multiple women in his life, for better or for worse. It's something that I always did. And then when I came into Islam, it wasn't even, people say, oh, you became Muslim to have multiple wives. No, it wasn't even an afterthought. And then someone was like, hey man, I know you used to always have these girls, you can have 4 wives. And I was like, hey, yeah, you're right. I forgot all about that part, So, thus was born Abuamerican, but no, I really started, it was a while actually before I started practicing polygyny inside of, after accepting Islam. It's when I got into Qatar. And when I got to Qatar, then I married 2 other wives, on, I guess, quote unquote, on top of my, my wife that I'd been with for 24, 25 years at the time. And it was a really, really eye-opening experience on multiple levels. From the man side of the game, basically, what's obligatory upon you as a man, and everything that you practically have to put into place to make it work. This is something that's never spoken about. And this is actually the gap I try and fill now. It's like the practical application is different than the theoretics. Everyone likes to, quote a lot of hadith and ayat and everything. But when you look at the practical application, it's quite different from, I don't want to call the book and the sunnah theoretics, but when you're saying like, look, house like this, house like that, treatment like this, treatment like that, it's very general. And then, you look at the hadith for specifics, but that takes a lot of research. It's a science on its own. This is why Muhammad al-Anjari, he has the CD set. It's called Ishrat al-Nisa, like, good living with wives and whatnot. So, I mean, these are things that take a lot of education and knowledge. And I had to actually just hammer through it on my own. So, after that failed attempt, I noticed there was I kind of guess you could say a codified female behavior at that point. I noticed that I had 3 wives. I had a Kenyan, a Somali, a Kenyan revert, a Somali. She was born, of course, Muslim, and then grew up mostly in the Khalij, in the Gulf, and a German revert. And these were 3 women with 3 different ethnicities, 3 different languages, 2 different backgrounds, or 3 different backgrounds. I say 2 because, the Kenyan was a Christian, but their weird Christianity over there. and then European Christian. And these were women who had zero connection other than me. And they were all acting and behaving in the exact same way. And literally sometimes I would just double take and I just like, wait. I just left that house and I know you two didn't talk and you're saying the exact same. How is this possible? And so I came to realize that a lot of this behavior is biological. And I mean, it really struck me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, okay, we have a biological trigger with its social expression. And so when I understood that, I said, okay, what is the biology behind this social expression? And that's generally how I view women now. And so now when you can figure out the biology behind, her behavior, her socially expressed behavior, man, it's like, it's like having the cheat codes. So thus Abuamerican was born. And I started writing about this. I started talking about this. I started teaching other guys about this. Then I ran into Rollo Tomasi. I started actually writing a book about everything that I had learned and I experienced. And then a friend of mine, he was like, hey, there's a book out here that's basically talking about what you're writing about. And he gave me Rollo Tomasi's, The Rational Male. I literally threw away the 72 pages that I wrote. I hand wrote 72 pages. I hand wrote them. Because when I first got to Germany, I was taking this bus system all over Germany. I didn't have a car. And so when I was on the bus, I didn't want to waste the time. And I started just handwriting on the bus all my notes. And so 72 pages I wrote by hand. I threw them away. I shouldn't have done that, but it is what it is. Yeah. And so now this second round, I've gotten, significantly better at it. But in between getting, polygynous, having a polygynous, lifestyle with wives, it was very difficult to find women who were appropriate for it, which brings me to the next part of my work, which is my vetting guide and it's not a sales pitch. I mean, people buy it, they cool. If they don't, that's also cool, because not everybody's interested in polygyny, but it is good for monogamous people also, but that's not a sales pitch. But what happened was, because I don't come from a traditionally Islamic society like yourself, Pakistan or Somalis or Arabs, who were born and raised into Islamic communities and countries, I'm like an outsider. And this is a big problem amongst a lot of reverts that, we feel like outsiders, and we're actually treated like outsiders. And so to actually find a wife is not so easy. I'm quite sure you can confirm, if you spoke to a family member, you could probably find a wife. As to whether or not it's the wife you want is a different question, but you could definitely say, hey, mom, hey, aunt, hey, sister, I'm looking to get married, and they could help you. I have nobody like this. And when you go to a community, you're eyed with a considerable degree of suspicion. So I had to take this upon myself to actually find wives. And what I found, oh my goodness, Allahu Akbar. It was a mess. A mix of feminisms, this, that, the other, the worst attributes you could find. Drug addicts, families knew this stuff, and they gave these girls to me. And so now I put together all of this information, and I was like, look, these are the red flag signs to look out for. And one of the first things I talk about in there is actually feminism. In my guide, is I talk about, you gotta look out for these feminists, because they're, my Allah Akbar, you do not want to marry one of those. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Rishi. So that's basically my story in how I became who I am right now. Just trying to find marriage and be happy.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, we're going to be talking about a lot of your work, and I think you've been very successful in putting back a lot of families and translating for them behaviors that generally people don't. And I think I've been on your shows quite a lot to know that you and Brother Jibril had a really tough time finding women, and it's a very heartbreaking statistic that 50 or 60% of the words would actually go back within 1 year because they're not accepted into the community, which is upon us as born Muslims, or let's say traditional Muslims, to make it easier for people who are coming to our communities. I mean, I do understand there are a lot of other welcoming gestures in terms of welcoming them in mosques, getting them through different scriptures and pepping them up and encouraging. But that's not all it takes when you're going to a new religion. You're cutting, in most cases, you're cutting from your own family and your support systems. And some people tend to move to Middle East and in Pakistan or India to actually be able to live the kind of let's say, quote unquote, the El Dorado when they were actually
Yeah.
shown that Islam is going to be a great religion, but now they actually have to see the practicing version of that, and boy, that turns into a nightmare. But before we actually go forward and talk a little bit about your work on feminism and vetting women. I come from a very different academic background. For example, for me, for a long time, it hasn't been an issue that why gender wars should be taken seriously. And I think there are a couple of women, out there who just lost it. They've had a bad relationship and they're ranting against men about all the problems that they have in life. And I think my first truly shocking experience came from when I was studying in Europe, actually. And there, where I really realized that the kind of romantic image that we have of our moms and our sisters, being all obedient and nice women, that truly isn't the picture. So I think a lot of young men, now that I teach in university, they are very perplexed about the changing landscape of how intergender dynamics play out. They have this image of they have to be the protector and the male guardian, and when they go to a marriage contract or a nikah, and they have no idea what they're signing up. It's just all gooey-eyed, rosy picture image of how life's going to be. How is that for you? I mean, you came from the Western world, and then I think the most appropriate thing here would be if you could expound a little bit on your marriages in Qatar, and also the cultural shock. And what did you find different, and what are the expectations?
Man, I mean, whew. I don't want to, oh man, this is a tough one to try and remain nice.
You don't have to be. We all know how it goes.
Well, thank you. I think okay. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I met a South African, and he told me, my father told me when coming here, because apparently his father worked in the Middle East, and so he came to work in the Middle East, and he said, my father told me when I come to the Middle East to bring one bag of money and two bags of patience. So if you ever if you ever go to the Middle East, I'm going to tell you bring 10 bags of patience, because this brother was actually very, very mild mannered. And so when you come from like Western culture, speaking to Westerners in specific, but I think the same applies to anyone. If you're coming from anywhere in the world, going to the Middle East, even Southeast Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, etc., bring a lot of patience with you, because you're not treated as you're accustomed to or as you would like to be. There is no idea or concept of treat others the way you would like to be treated. That's something that you need to understand in terms of cultural shock. There's a huge degree of disrespect there. Unless you are in a very high economic status, or position. And so, and even then, there's a lot. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Even then, there's a lot to overcome. But I don't want to just trash the Muslim countries, and that's why I'm trying to take it easy on them. But definitely take a lot of patience with you if you go there. You're going to deal with a lot of racial and ethnic divisions, tribalism, all sorts of things that you. Okay, let me rewind a bit here. We're always told about hijrah, and moving to the Muslim lands and moving to Muslim countries. And you have to understand that the basically the Ansar are dead, and you're not the Muhajirun. You're not going to get the same welcome. You're not even close. You're probably going to get the opposite. Generally, you're treated as if you're not wanted there. And the more religious you are, it would appear in certain countries, the less welcomed you are. So, the idealisms, the whole, oh, we're all gonna be brothers and hold hands and skip into the sunset, and have picnics on the beach. Just give it up. Go there, put your head down, do your work, and just basically treat it like a West, a more racist West with masjids. So yeah, because if you don't, you're gonna see a lot of problems. And we saw a lot of brothers who went there, and they struggled with their Islam in general just because of the treatment of the Muslims. I mean, the way they were treated. There were guys who actually just left Islam. There were guys who fled, certain countries that are known for religiousness, one border away, and they came to this country. Homeschool your kids. Learn it. It's tough. It's not easy. Homeschool your kids, because if you send them to a public school, You know, unless they're absolute fighting beasts and monsters and they're willing to fight entire tribes and cousins and nephews and whatever else, you just or send them to private schools. You know, with other Western kids, it's amazing because you leave the West to get away from the West, and then you have to send your kids to a school with Westerners in order to have them treated fairly and not end up with PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder. And we actually saw children with post traumatic stress disorder symptoms there from the level of ill treatment they got. So these are things you need to look out for when you go there, and these are things that are not clear when you leave to go to the Middle East. So in terms of like culture shock, it's massive. There is no this idea of like, you're being racist. Treat everybody nice and fair and whatever else and equal and egalitarian society. It doesn't exist. I don't care what they say. Oh, we're all equal, brother. There's no black and the black one's not better than the white one or whatever else. And then they go there and all they do is they make black jokes and, and Indian jokes and this jokes and that jokes. And I mean, it's just completely accepted until they're under the spotlight on Twitter or on social media. And then they start quoting that hadith. So if you go there, just be ready for that.
Do you believe that that's something that's reserved for you as African, African American, or is it across the board? Like, if you're white, would that have been a little different, or if you were richer?
No, there's definitely an ethnic hierarchy there. Like at the top are white people. Then there's locals, or they might be equal, and then after that are Westerners in general, and then you're basically ranked according to how much you make. So like a Western Pakistani who makes less than me is going to be treated lesser than me. This is why I said economic high position. But then if an ethnic Pakistani who from the West, he has to be from the West, if he has a British passport and he makes more money than me, then he's treated better than I am. But basically you're treated like trash until they realize you're an American. And even then they try and take that away from you. It's like, they ask Aslan, enter min wen, where are you from? And I say America. Aslan, originally. Yeah, Somali, Sudan, because they just want to put you in a position where he can treat you bad. I'm like, no, my mom's British, my dad's American. And then they're like, oh, he's got the Alto, a triple ace card. His deck is stacked because my mom's British, my dad's American. It's just stuff you have to deal with in terms of culture shock. In terms of marriage, it's actually quite nice there in terms of marriage. You don't find that it's anything like the West whatsoever. In terms of rights and what's expected in terms of behavior within the relationship, they're completely on the man's side. That can be good and that can be bad. I mean, but in general, if you have to be a real piece of work. You have to be a real piece of garbage for them to side with the woman. I mean, you literally got to be beating the woman up or something like that. She marks, bruises, bloody. But in general, if you're just having an argument or discussion and she wants to call the cops and get you thrown out of the house, they're not going to hear it. They're literally like, you want to cancel her visa? They're literally like, this woman's causing you trouble and you're here making a bunch of money. She's a stay-at-home wife. You want to just get rid of her? You should just get married again, bro. I mean, that's basically the mentality there.
Okay, but let's come reverse a little in this step. I mean, that's after you get married. But what about getting married? Because I think we have culturally the same problem that I think that's and it's a nuisance in the whole Islamic world, which is mahar. And that's I mean, sorry for my French, but I think it's simply selling our daughters in some ways. Because I think there was one of your videos where I heard one of your students, they were talking about $500,000 as mahar. And that's coming from their parents, not themselves. And, I think that they perceive it as some form of pride and something to brag about. And I don't think that was the original spirit of mahar. How hard is that to actually get married there?
Okay, well, let me approach this from two levels. First, it's easier to get married outside of the Middle East just because of legalities. If you're dealing with the state in terms of getting married, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So it's better to get married outside of the Middle East and then bring your wife in. That's the first thing. In terms of mahar, it's just ridiculous. It's unheard of for anyone anywhere nowadays. It's just becoming unheard of unless the woman actually, truly, honestly, and truly desires you, which is it's going to be difficult to find that if you're sticking to a 100% halal marriage type system. You'd have to be like the ultimate guy to where she's like, oh, I seen that guy on TV and that's the guy. And now he's at my door and he wants to marry me. And she's going to have a strong desire for you. Other than that, it's, guys are going to be chatting with the women, whatever else. And these things that are, impermissible in general. But unfortunately happens a lot these days. So, in terms of maher, it's become insane. And it's a good question. Like, where did all of this come from in this mentality? Because there's actually hadith talking about, the person who raises the maher above the, maher of, the daughter of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I think they said it's like equivalent to like $400 or something nowadays. Then there was some negative connotation connected to it. But it is insane. And I had this conversation with some families in Saudi Arabia where they were talking about like, there was in the Eastern province, there's this Shia Sunni divide. Obviously, there always is everywhere. And the Shia are basically taking over the Eastern province of Saudi Arabia. It's not like a government takeover, but in just terms of demographics and population. And this bothers the locals. And they were saying, for the price of one of our daughters getting married, actually for the price of her maher, not even the marriage, they said they'll marry 25 to 30, families. And then one of our daughters will get married at the same price. He said, so my daughter will get a 200,000 maher and they'll marry 25 people for that. So oddly, the Shia are closer to the Sunnah in this regard than the Sunnis are. And it's just, it's a bit crazy that this happened. And I said to them, I said, you're the man of the house. This is in your hands. And he says, and this brings into kind of like a feminism type thing. It's like, but then the wife will start to argue and say, her cousin or her sister got this much and she's not worth less. And so now what they've done is they've attached the worth of the woman to how much she gets in a maher. And obviously there is no connection, because if there was a connection between the maher, and how high it is and the value of the woman, we'd know it in the Sunnah. But it's not in the Sunnah. It's not in the Quran. It's not in the Sunnah. You can't find that connection anywhere. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Basically what's happening nowadays is guys and families are selling their daughters. And it's a shame, it's ugly, because there's no place for this in a religion.
You made a very good point here that, if you put out mahar, I mean, that's the full name, at least it's how it's here. If that's raised too high, the logical conclusion, or at least one that we have observed for so long now, is that they won't get married. So that's why there are a lot of unmarried women sitting in Gulf and also the Southeast Asian countries, and they're getting bitter, and there's a lot of resentment. I mean, we know from personality psychology that these people who are full of estrogen and testosterone level kicking through the roof, and then they don't get married because of some kind of cultural inhibition that doesn't even exist. But now they're also dependent on their wali, because unlike in West, children are a lot more dependent on their parents in terms of finances. So there's no concept of summer jobs or having a side gig, or they don't even know some kind of skills. I mean, they would just love to sit and play video games and buy new cars when the parents are paying for that. And that means that they cannot get their own place and make their own decisions, even when they're 18 or something. And that builds a lot of tension between these genders. And what ends up happening, and I get a lot of requests for consultations. I do a little bit of counseling for my students, and a lot of other people who are in the position that are extremely bitter and resentful, and that's not a good recipe for a happy life. And what ends up happening is that either they get into haram, or something happens that none of the families actually like. But what I wanted to pose as a question to you is that where do you think that's going, and where do you think that we can actually intervene in the situation in times like these, that our young daughters and sisters and brothers also have a halal way of dealing with a lot of this flooding of Western ideals, and at the same time fighting with the traditions that they have at home?
Ooh, that's a tough one, man. I don't know. Me and Gabriel were discussing this, and really, and it's a very general statement, and it's true. But how does it actually look in terms of practice? People need to return to the book and the Sunnah. That's just, really, that's what it boils down to. But we can say this. How does it really look? It's one thing to say it for me as a father, who became willingly with choice Muslim. But then if you're looking at like a family who's been upon Islam for hundreds of years, or maybe the family's been Muslim since, the time of the Sahaba, and then you tell them the book and the Sunnah, but now to them they can't differentiate between culture and the book and the Sunnah. How do you explain that to them? Because it's been in place for since they can remember. My grandmother was like this, her mom was like this, and yada yada. My mom was like this, and so this is how it is. How do you, Minhaj, you come from a traditionally Islamic family. How do you go to your parents and you lecture them on Islam? They're going to look at you like you're crazy in general. And so generally what's going to have to happen is an outsider who they respect, but then at the same time doesn't come from the same culture, has to tell them and talk to them about Islam, and they have to accept it from them, because it's going to be difficult to accept information from your child in general. I'm a father, and my children, they're smart in certain areas, and I accept their knowledge. When I'm building something in terms of PCs, I listen to my son very closely. But when he starts talking to me about life, job, work, whatever else, social movements and, situations, I just look at him like, dude, you haven't been around long enough. So it's similarly, they're going to look at you the same way when you approach them about Islam. What? I was practicing Islam before you was even born, before I met your mother. The mentality is not going to be there. It's going to be hard for them to listen to you. And it's not, I don't fault them for it. That's not a fault. It's just how it is, because yeah, here I am 48 going on 50, my son's, 16, and he's starting telling me about stuff socially. I'm like, come on, man. When I was 16, what we went through. So it's the same thing. So actually getting them to accept this stuff, that's a lot of introspection, on part of the parents and, the culture in general, because even let's say your culture on a micro level, if a family accepts that, okay, what we're doing needs to change, how do you change that on a macro level? Now you have uncles, let's say the father changes the mentality and the mother changes. Now their brothers and their sisters, they need to change their mentality too, because now the parents are going to be under pressure, because now you're looking at your nephew. If my brother, he's an ardent feminist, the way he raises his daughters bothers me, as a brother. But do you see what I mean? How now you have outsiders putting pressure on him. My brother's trying to put pressure on me to raise my children a certain way, and I have to resist him, the rest of the family, the wider culture and society around me, to resist feminism within my family. It's the same thing with like culturally Islamic practices that are generally not correct. It's the same problem. So how do you practically implement this? It's an entire societal change that needs to happen and shift. And how do you make that happen? It's unheard of. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a really tough question. And a lot of times there was this girl, I was giving her a one-to-one consultation. She's trying to get married to a guy. She's from a Bengali community, and she wants to marry an African American. Not me, guys. The guy has 2 wives. She's going to be his 3rd wife. It's not me. And she had to go to her parents with that as her first marriage as a Bengali, and they really don't marry outside of their community, that she wants to marry an African American who traditionally they generally don't like, and then to top it off as his 3rd wife. I was like, look, you're gonna have to just bite that bullet. You're gonna have to go with the book and the Sunnah, use these ayats, use these hadith, and just go to them and tell them they're gonna have to eat this if that's who you want to marry. They actually ate it. They actually took it. I was surprised that it went so smooth, but it's an individual battle at this point. I think at this point it's an individual battle. You have to understand. You have to know the Quran and the Sunnah. And you have to be able to take that to your parents, and your parents have to be people who actually take it. And if they don't take it, then you got to sit there and you got to break it down day by day, bit by bit, from a aqidah position first, of Islamic creed, and then Islamic manhaj, methodology. And it's a long battle and journey. I mean, there's no easy way out. We know this in life in general, Well,
I've noticed that, a lot of this children that I talk to, and I'm quite notorious for being a very friendly teacher, and we could actually talk about anything, and that's not a normal thing for some reason, and which shouldn't be the case, actually. I mean, you should be friends with your children, for what I believe, and once in a while when you talk to them and you talk about their life and what they think and who their friends are and what they're aspire to be in life, and then you talk to their parents. I mean, if you know them, I'm so happy that I'm not teaching in high school where you actually have to have parents meetings, but then maybe in university when you talk to some of their parents, and some of these times it's so shocking. I said, do you even know your children and what they want to have be in life and what their aspirations are? I mean,
Nope.
you already have a plan for his life for like 20 years down the line, and he doesn't want to be at home. And it's
Yeah.
just like unbelievable wedge in between these parents. And it's just like, don't you actually sit on the same couch and watch a movie and talk about things and how it's going to be? I mean, what kind of parentship did you actually have when you were children? And that's something that brings me to the point that I've listened to you for quite some while now, and then I know that you have been a very successful father. A very few people actually know that. I mean, they think of you some kind of misogynist and other labels, and all kind of bad names. But there's also a
Yeah.
softer side of you. I mean, you've talked fairly well about your daughter also in her age to become a mother, and for you to find her a suitable husband. So there's another side of you also that isn't always marrying, so your own children and responsibility. So how do you actually approach, and I think this is some advice that children these days need bitterly, because there's a fatherhood crisis. That
Mhm.
means that a lot of people find you as a surrogate father whose own parents don't actually have time, and so they're looking for
Mhm.
support from online. I mean, why do you think that we have so many people Googling about these issues? I mean, these are the things that you normally talk to your parents about. At least in my times, I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
not fairly that old, but then there's so many people who are finding your work influential. So let's talk about your own children. How did you actually approach their upbringing, and what did you instill in them, both as a father of a daughter and then your sons?
Okay, so this goes into uncomfortable topics. As we know, the African American story is one of slavery, and that's how African Americans ended up in the United States by far and by large. Of course, there were free African Americans who traveled there before they were considered African Americans, who traveled to the United States, and they were part of settling and whatnot, but they were very few in number. So the large percentage of African Americans that ended up in the United States, history lesson guys, they ended up there through slavery, being slaves, being brought there from predominantly West Africa for logistics purposes. My family, obviously, were some of those people, my ancestors. And at some point, they just decided they had enough. And they were like, we're escaping. And they escaped. And they went to the north. And they ended up joining the northern armies, the black regiments, and coming back and fighting the south. And since then, it's been a family tradition that we, as a people, will not return to slavery. It's just a mentality we have in our family, and I don't think slavery is returning anytime soon, but it's a mentality that stuck with us. So every generation, a male has to serve in the military. A male or multiple males. In this particular regard, I have two sons that served in the military. There's just an area of contention amongst the Muslims. They're like, they're serving in the U.S. military, but the reality is, I've looked for Muslim armies, and they're not hiring. If you want to get into a military and get military training, good tactical military training, you have options of France, United Kingdom, United States, and a few other countries. Germany's not taking foreigners, but French does. They have the Foreign Legion, and it's literally foreigners. It's full of foreigners. The United Kingdom will take them, and the United States will. And us being American citizens, that was our option. So this military mentality permeates throughout my family, and there has to be this degree of discipline in the family structure also. And so that's basically the mentality that I raised my family with. One of a military structure in terms of like there is a hierarchy. It is unavoidable. And this is not arguable, because if you go into the military, you find out very quickly, yeah, democracy doesn't really exist in the military. There is a hierarchy, and you're going to follow it. And if not, you're going to be disciplined, or you're going to be put in jail, or you're going to be you're kicked out, and you're going to have a bad name. You're going to get a dishonorable discharge. In our regards, that's our family. We don't kick anybody out of the family, but there are consequences within the family. And so there is a hierarchy that needs to be followed, and that's understood. And so now it's just basically, it's understood that who's in charge next in terms of your age, your responsibilities, and decisions and choices you make. And you have to raise your children accordingly. They're all given tasks. They're all given duties. They're all given positions within the family. It's not like, you're Sergeant so-and-so and you're in charge of laundry. It's understood. It just becomes from the upbringing, that you have to have not a considerable, but a specific degree of, responsibility, school, housework, this, that, the other. There are expectations of you in your behavior and the way that you behave, and you're not left to your own. Just like in the military, where you're basically your military property, your family property. And you don't get to just go off and do whatever you want. You don't get to think whatever you want. You know, I mean, we're Muslims. We have a certain mentality. We have a certain tradition. We have a certain ethics, virtues, values, morals, and ethics, and you need to follow those. You know, and you instill this from a very early age. People say, "Oh, your children are autonomous beings and they can decide what they want to be." No, they're not. They're part of a culture. They're part of a society. They're part of a family. You are not born on your own. You do not grow up on your own. And so you don't get to pick whatever you want to be on your own. You know, if something is wrong, yes, you leave it, you abandon it, you tell everybody, say, look, you know, we're doing this as a family, this is incorrect, and this is why. And that's based upon the book and the sunnah. But otherwise, you don't get to choose whatever you want to do unless it's work. And as long as that's not haram, you know, who you want to marry, fine. As long as it's a person, you know, who's, you know, halal to you. But otherwise, you know, all of this stuff, and you can't be, what's the word? You can't be flexible on this, you know? I mean, so that's just basically the core, the brass tacks of the mentality of raising this family. You are part of a family. You are part of a culture. You are part of a quote unquote tribe, and you can't just do whatever you want, you know, unless you want to go out into the wild out there, you know, and be on your own. And you show them that it's not a place you want to be on your own. You show them the consequences of freedom, and there are consequences to freedom. You know, too much freedom. You see people doing dumb stuff that looks fun but has consequences for their life later on, and you show them this. Like, yeah, this looks fun right now, but look at this. You know, oh, you want to go out in the hoe? Look, yeah, you're gonna be a baby mama with like 7 different fathers for 7 different kids. You know, you really want to be that person? No, you don't. And so this is the way you basically, you know, go through the entire family structure from the bottom to the top.
It's very interesting that you talk about this, and you have talked about how you have raised your sons to be protective and tough, and you know the 5 mile walks as
Yeah.
children, and now they don't think of anything as hard,
Yeah.
which is. I think it's very saddening that these days schools, you know, they're overprotective of children playing football, and then one of them stumbles down and goes, "Oh my God, you know, you gotta go to hospital." No, you don't. You know, you just have to get up and do another round. That's really sad that these days, you know, you're feminizing the men, and if you're over aggressive in some places, I think it's in Sweden already, that they, you know, put in injections, can make you calm down as if that's a bad thing. Now,
Yeah.
what I wanted
I
to
think it's
ask
called
you
Ritalin.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, I think, or maybe it's the other way. Ritalin is more like, what's that?
I think that's it. I think that's the
Something
one they
else.
used to, you know, calm you
Is it
down.
okay?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So, what I wanted to ask is that how are you even managing that in Germany? Because last time I remember, out of mistake, one of my friends in Sweden, and his daughter wanted a toy or something in the market, and he didn't actually get that. You know, for some reason, it was just some minor thing. And she was told in school that if your parents actually scold you or remotely look like they're hitting you, just call a number, and she did. And what ended up happening was that both of them ended up in jail for a day or something, and they had a huge lecture by some feminist about how to take care of children. And I think it's not very different in Germany. So how are you managing that? And also, if you can touch upon the kind of influence that they have in school, or are you homeschooling now?
No, homeschooling is illegal in Germany. It's literally against the law. You
Ah,
can
okay.
end up, yeah, you can lose, custody over your children over it. So it's not something you want to try. Basically, you say yes and you do whatever you want to do. Just raise your kids, man. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's all a veneer. They don't really want responsibility over your children. People give responsibility to their children to this, greater society on a whole in terms of the education system, but really they don't want it because at the end of the day, those people running the system, they're people, and you find that the teachers, the educators, whatever else, they're all overworked and they're all stressed out. So the less they have to deal with, the happier they are. If you're raising your kids properly, walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, your children are going to be highly disciplined and well behaved in almost all environments until they set loose. And you teach them that also. When it's okay to fight, it's okay to fight. Who it's okay to fight, bullies, whatnot. Bullying you, or a family member. I don't believe like you're trying to police the world. That's not something you do. That's not your job. I don't like the idea of my children becoming white knights. So You teach them when it's okay to fight and that it is okay to fight, that it is not a problem, that violence is an option, even though it's not an answer. It's not the preferred answer, but it remains an option, because people just, they're not going to be, reasoned with. And you let your children go about. And generally, with their personality that you bring them up with, they generally stay out of trouble, altogether. They see and they recognize from the ethics that they have in terms of behavior, who's trouble already. So when they go to school and they see the bad kids and they see them like acting all crazy or whatever else, they're literally like, what the heck are they on? And they don't even want to be around them. So they stay out of trouble. They go to school and they recognize authority, as long as it's not asking you to do something impermissible. And so they say, okay, fine. You know what? This is the teacher. I'm going to listen until the teacher asks me to do something stupid. And then, I'm going to bring it home and then I'll let my dad deal with it. And then I take their side, in fights or whatever else, because they have to trust the system. So when you teach your children these ethics, virtues, values, morals, you have to support them. You can't go to school and collapse. Your son was fighting in school. Okay. What happened? Well, I don't know, but he was fighting. Yeah, well, I taught my son that it's okay to fight, so, and there's rules to fighting. And if he got into a fight, then that means somebody was attacking him, bullying him, or one of his family members. So what actually happened? What's the story? Well, we don't know the details. Well, then come back to me when you have the details. Other than that, if somebody messes with my child or someone messes with his sibling, they're going to get punched in the mouth if they're not going to listen to reason and leave them alone. If you don't like that, we'll go find another school. And generally, they don't want that argument. They're just like, okay, look, we'll find out what the story is. And then that's the end of the discussion. They don't go researching it because they don't care. They don't want to deal with that stress. And so you need to be able to support your child, and say, was he wrong? That's why you want to know the story. It's like, hey, look, tell me the story. Was he wrong? This is what I want to know. Well, it's wrong to fight. No, it's not. The police pull out guns and shoot people. Is that wrong? No. They have a purpose. They have a reason. That's why they're armed. Now, on a personal level, so that's the greatest society, and you got to be able to have this conversation. On a greatest society whole, that's their position. On a macro level, how does that look? If my child had to fight, who was watching and monitoring these children? Where are the local police? If you're on the street and you're getting attacked and the police aren't showing up, what are you going to do? You're going to take there and take the knife stab, or you're going to fight the person? You're going to pick up a stick and hit him in the head. You're going to pick up the stick and hit him in the head. This is my child right now. Unless you can tell me he's the person with the knife, he's striking back. Can you tell me that my child is the aggressor here? Generally, they can't tell you the story. They just want, you to come in, beat them over the head in front of the teacher to give them more authority over the child. And, you don't want to have that. They understand their position, but it has limits.
Yeah. I think it's a very straightforward and appropriate response, especially in case of fights at school. But that brings me to another point, which is a lot of funding these days is happening by the Western governments in forms of non-governmental organizations and different women empowerment NGOs in Muslim countries. So we have a lot of these organizations making a lot of mess. So we recently had this issue about an actor who was charged for sexual harassment by other actresses who've been working with them. And, that's always, it doesn't really end well, but, he brought charges against them, 8 of them, and he actually won the case. Now, what ended up happening is that, they all got together and created a whole Twitter storm and a public trial against him. And then we on our group and on our page are doing our best to actually fight the storm and to bring the truth to the front. But I've researched in the aftermath of that, and there's like an NGO in all Gulf countries getting funding from U.S. and UK, German embassies, different foundations. Recently, India actually banned a lot of those NGOs because they're required to actually show their funding, where they're getting it from, show their account statements, and they haven't done that. Now, the idea, and I'm connecting it to your argument about the school. So a lot of these ideas come from the teaching in school. For example, we have now super cool Muslims that are supporting LGBTQ, and then a lot of non-Islamic ideas, and women are being trained in school and in university that it's okay if you don't cook, it's okay if you don't do the household work, and you have to have your own career, and your husband and your family should be the second priority. So a lot of these ideas are being sponsored by these countries. Now, how do you actually stand up to these ideas, and especially keep in mind that when you go to a divorce course, things are not being judged on reality. They're being judged on drama. If you can speak more and you can become a huge victim, the case is already decided.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really sure I understand the question, but I can say this. Women have a different way of viewing the world than men, and women in general are teaching the next generation of people, including the men. Just a quick example of what I mean, and then I'll try and like, codify and understand your question. I was at a daycare recently, and you know they were eating breakfast, and there was chicken and like all sorts of stuff. What do you call this? Like, the slices you put on bread, and the kids were all eating together. It was really cute and everything like this. Then this spider crawls inside the daycare, and this little boy runs up and he stomps it. Everybody's screaming and freaking out because it's turning to winter in Germany, and I don't know if you know this, but spiders can't survive in snow and freezing weather, so they come inside warm places, which are obviously human abodes, or they bury into the ground. So you'll find that this time of the year, a lot of spiders will come into the house. And so spiders are coming inside the daycare, kid stomps it. And then one of the kids went and said, Timmy, whatever his name is, he stomped a spider. And the teacher was like, you don't kill animals, you don't kill insects. I'm very strict, I'm very hard against this. And I just looked at this lady, like, I just saw you eating like chicken salami. Wait, what? Did you? So, now this kid's sitting here looking, and I don't think that was going through his head, but you could just seem kind of confused. And I'm just, I don't think he was thinking about the chicken salami, but, I was just like, what are you teaching his boys?
But I think her idea was that as long as you don't kill it yourself, I think it's all permissible.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I missed that part.
That means that, if you stomp on the spider, I can probably eat that.
Yeah, so you got to imagine the effect that this had, because you could see the kid was actually sitting there thinking about it, and he was, it was frying his little tiny circuits. They're not well developed yet, so it was really, imagine the effect that it has on him 10 years from now. Germany has a massive pig problem, and that's because nobody is hunting anymore, and so pigs are just taking over the country, wild pigs, and they're tearing up the farming, they're tearing up all sorts of stuff, because the people are being indoctrinated that it's not okay to hunt. So we find that in general, the feminine mentality or the female mentality is being passed on to multiple generations, and it's having a severe effect on multiple levels, multiple generations of men, because men are not in education. So I'm not really sure if I really understood your question, but I mean, this just gives you a general idea how things are here.
Yeah, what I meant is that, that's the same point, that women are in control of a lot of indoctrination, both at school and at home. And when we put these liberal Marxist vegan teachers in school, and your children are going to these schools, you can be sure that, they're going to be learning something that you don't like. And this whole mentality has now turned into organizations, and they're coming to Muslim world, telling these women how oppressed and how miserable they are, being housewives, taking care of children. They need to have their own careers. And you can look back at their own statistics, which is hilarious. Half of those marriages, at least in Germany, I know for sure, it's 50% for the first marriage, the divorce rate, and for the second is 70%. So my ex-wife was also a German doctor, and then she was also vegan, and said, "Hey, we can have all the proteins from these vegetables. We don't have to kill animals." I say, "Yeah, nothing's going to make me leave meat." So these kind of ideas. They're going to actually boil over to Muslim countries now also. And I think you have already seen what it brings. So what can we actually do back home, make sure that we have a strong bastion against those ideas?
The most you can do and the best you can do is be a strong male figure, and just be ready to fight the long battle, especially when it comes to family. I mean, on an individual level, you're going to have to do it as a man anyway. But when it comes to family, you got to be ready for a long haul battle. To give an example, when I was talking about going to the schools and whatnot, generally when you go there as a strong male figure, generally they respect that. You will find those women who want to just resist because you are a strong male figure. Oh, well, who does this guy think he is? He thinks he's one of those, macho guys or whatever else. But in general, when you come in there as an authoritative, male who's firm in his ideas and whatever else, the fact is that most women find that attractive. They back down to it. They defer to it. This is the standard female setting, that they defer to strong male figures. Now, obviously, you're not going to have authority with all women, but generally, if you come in with that frame, most men aren't prepared for it. Like the principals of the schools where my children go, it's a male. And he's not accustomed to that. He's used to guys, cordial, whatever else. And I'm not saying be, rude or whatever else, but that you come in and you're just pretty fixed, in your ideas. And you're like, look, well, this is not a problem, and you explain to him why in a logical way, the guy accepts. And in women in general, if you just come with an authoritative, but, positive figure, or in a way, because it's not what you say to women, it's how you say it to women, and you come in, you're authoritative but positive, they generally accept it. And then you have less problems with your child. Now they reflect that personality that you have onto your child. They're like, I understand why this kid is this way, because you came in and you're behaving in a certain way. So now they understand why your child is behaving a certain way. And this is also one of the, primary importance of being an active parent. So this is the way that individually we can take care of our children and, how they go into society and whatnot. As a whole, this comes into the whole battle. You're raising your children against the entire cultural wave that's like sweeping the world. And we're talking about feminism. And so, it's, you got to make your child tough mentally, and part of that, and we talked, you talked about this earlier, part of making your child mentally tough is making him physically tough. Because if you can take a 2-year-old on a 5-kilometer hike and you make him go through it, there's not much that someone's going to put in his way that mentally he's not going to be able to deal with, and he's not going to connect it in his head. It's just like, I've been through worse. What are you going to do? And then again, coming back to family support, when you come in and you support your child, if I know I'm right as a child, this is what I was raised with. If my father comes, he's not going to come down on my neck for it. He's going to back me up. So now the ultimate authority figure, my father or my mother, comes in, the hierarchy, and they defend me and my decisions and my choices and what I've done. Your child is going to turn out okay, even in the wave and in the age of feminism. But they there has to be that military support. We never leave a man behind. It's the mentality in the military. How much more so when it comes to your family? If I'm going to go through boot camp and whatnot, and then go through basic, and train with a bunch of guys, and I'm not going to leave my homie behind, who I just met, what about my family? What about my child? This is a battle we're going to fight.
No man left behind.
Yep.
So there's something that I really want you to weigh in, because you have probably more experience than anyone in this regard, which is, these days we all know about marital rape, especially the kind of trauma that men go through in terms of child support and separation from their own children and alimony and a lot of other things. And I think situation is becoming worse in Pakistan also in terms of divorce laws. I mean, we do have something called restitution of conjugal rights, which is kind of a frivolous lawsuit that you can bring against your wife, if she's left the house and for unforeseeable reasons. So it's not like Western where you can simply have a no-fault divorce and things like this. But then it's still it's not as worse. But then still, when you're getting married, so you have a nikah in front of you. A lot of men, what they do is, and that's a very common mistake, that they write mahar that they cannot pay. So it's kind of a module, so that they have to pay that later. Or that there's some kind of security or a bond in terms of property or in terms of some kind of gold. And that's kind of a lack on existential threat if they divorce the woman, they would have to pay that. So a lot of men choose to be in that misery because they're not able to pay that. So what are some of the things that men can do to actually protect them from this ongoing slaughter that they would have to face if they divorce, especially when they have children? One of the things that I recommend is that never sign a paper that you don't know what you're writing on.
Yeah, that's a very good start. That's just a general. This is a general rule. Whenever I go in Germany, like sometimes I go into an office and they give me a paper to sign, and I literally read it, and I pull out my phone and I start using Google Translate because even though it's my second language, sometimes I'm like, it's legalese. It's always legalese, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm reading this," and you're like, "I don't know what I'm signing here." Sometimes I want to make sure there's no small print. So in general, yeah, that's very sound advice in everything, but especially marriage. Don't sign anything you don't understand or you don't agree to. That's the first thing. If it's possible, I would say if it's possible, it's not always possible. It's very difficult in the Middle East. Do not get legally married anywhere. Mm-hmm. If it is possible to get religiously married only, to get a nikah, and you can actually get a certificate for your nikah, and it's accepted if you want to make hajj with your wife. They accept it. You can go and make hajj with your wife with a nikah stamped and signed from a masjid. It doesn't have to be a legal marriage. Avoid it at all costs. There is no obligation anywhere in the Book and the Sunnah to be legally married. The rules of marriage are set. They're written. They're codified. They're as solid as granite stone, if not more, because they're unbreakable and they're unchangeable, because it's Qala Allah, Qala Rasul. It's the saying of Allah and the saying of his messenger. And that is 100% acceptable. To just have a Islamic marriage, you do not need a legal one. Now, of course, you're going to run into women and families that are going to say, if you don't get legally married, you're not going to marry our girl. And this is one of the reasons why I say have multiple options, because, you need to, you need to have options just in case something falls through. Don't get tied up in, oh, she's the one. No, she's one of like 3.5 billion. So don't get legally married. If it's possible, avoid legal marriage, because legal marriage is a real minefield. There's no real benefit to legal marriage for a man. For a woman, absolutely, but for a man, there's no real benefit to him.
Did I lose you?
So yeah. That's what I'd say the primary solution, because we know from Islamic marriage, the woman doesn't get all of these rewards and incentives. She's not incentivized to divorce her husband, which we know Islamic she can't do anyway. In Islam, a woman cannot divorce a man. She can go to a qadi, she can get a khula, she can get a separation or an annulment, but really she can't divorce her husband. And even if she does, it's not incentivized Islamically to do so. I lost him. Anyway, going on, guys. Just talk about this until he comes back. A woman is not incentivized Islamically to get a divorce. There is no, there is no, what do you call this? I don't even know what it's called. Spousal support, long-term, extremely expensive spousal support. This doesn't exist in Islam. She's covered for 3 months until she goes back to her parents' house or, wherever she goes to. Child support. Of course, you are obligated to take care of your children. This is a different topic, but what it takes to feed and clothe a child, it's a different, topic altogether. She has no incentive to divorce you with an Islamic marriage. With a legal marriage, it's right there. It's like, hey, divorce this guy, get him kicked out of his own house, and then he's going to pay you to stay in the house. I say Western marriage, what Western marriage is? I call it this. Western marriage is a job you pay to be in and can be fired from.
Exactly. And lose custody of your children.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, wait, I pay to be here and then I can get fired? How does that work? This is a Holiday Inn or something? What is this? Is this Disneyland? Yeah.
Well, generally, how do you even get out of marriage? Are there any consequences? Because I know a lot of people that I've counseled, and I've seen a lot of my friends, unfortunately, in the situation where they're kind of like family feuds, and and there are there's a lot of litigation.
I'm losing a lot. You're choppy.
Was generally.
Oh yeah, I didn't catch any of this. Am I the only one that's choppy? I didn't catch anything. Your connection is very choppy, brother.
I'd go the knife. It's not working. It's not a jib. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you went crazy choppy there for a second, and I missed like everything. So
okay, no, I just kind of shut down the video, so maybe it's a little bit better. Okay. Normally it works fine. I don't know for some reason. So what I was saying is that a lot of people, they do have family feuds here also when they divorce. So it's kind of a long-lasting battle, either in the courts. Sensible people generally don't do that because they know, there's no compulsion between two people who do not want to live together. Especially when you do have children, and it's a little bit more complicated. But generally, how did you actually manage to get out of a lot of these situations? You do understand it's complicated when you have children. So what do you have to say about that?
Getting out of complicated and sticky situations. Really, there's multiple things that need to happen here. Let's start off with you as an individual and as a man. First off, be the best possible man that you can be. and not, don't be it for her, be it for you. And generally, when you're being the best man you can be for you, and yes, this is connected, then generally you end up being the best man for her. And so if things don't work out, she's generally going to separate with you on good terms. So generally, if you have a positive effect on her in general, but it's obvious it's not going to work, when you divorce, you can divorce one another on good terms. That's the first step. Generally, when I marry a woman, I use my ex-wives as references. I can literally give them the numbers of like 3 or 4 ex-wives and say, hey, talk to them, and I'll get a good reference. I mean, I literally do this. So I mean, if you can't do that, then I'm not saying you should, but you should be able to. I'm not saying it's ideal either. Secondly, try not to, as best as possible, unless it's like a really, really ugly and bad situation. Try not to involve outsiders. The more, and this applies more to women than men. Men generally don't involve outsiders, but women tend to bring in their friends, their family, whatever else, and then they'll say a lot of stuff about the man that's really negative, and then she'll go back to him and she'll be all happy and lovey-dovey. And then what happens is they're not equating her temporary, because everything a woman says is about how she feels right now. And how she feels right now can change in 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 hours, and it usually does. So when she's mad and she's ranting to her family or her friends, and this is, like I said, predominantly for the women, this part, don't take 10 minutes, 10 days, I don't care what it takes. Don't involve those people, because what you tell them about your husband, and actually you can apply this to men too, whatever you say about your wife or your husband, your partner, that's going to stick with the people you told with. And all they're going to do is see you negatively. And all they're going to do is harass and harangue you to divorce that person. And it's going to put a lot of outside pressure on a relationship that might be just going through, 2 people who are trying to get along or trying to get together. It's 2 sovereign individuals living under one roof. It's not easy. It's not simple. People say, marriage is supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be simple. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what everybody says until they get married. And sometimes it does work out. You just have this quote unquote synergy where 2 people just get along really well. That's awesome. That's beautiful, but it's not always like that. So don't involve outsiders unless it's absolutely necessary. And then third, yeah, I think that's actually, if you follow those 2 basic rules, it should make it easy if you're going to leave a relationship, because generally outsiders, even if it's the legal system, they make things more difficult and more ugly than it needs to be. Usually when 2 people want to separate, they just want to separate. They just want to get apart. And it's like, I just don't want to live with you. I don't want to see you. And so work that out between yourselves, because you both want it. Why do you need to involve other people? Why do you need to make them look like a bad guy or evil person to where, like you said, a family feud starts? You know what? Wouldn't it just be easier to say, hey, you know what? This isn't working. I don't want to stay. No, you should stay. No, I don't want to. Just listen to me. This isn't going to work. You don't need to go into details. Fine. Accept it. If you raise your children right, accept, okay, fine, this is not working. Come stay home. I'll talk to him as a father if you feel it's necessary. And it should be necessary. Talk to him and see how he feels about the situation. See if there's reconciliation that could be met. If it can't, then fine, separate. You don't need to go into details. You don't need to go, because then, yes, your family feuds will start.
I know you do a lot of good work where you patch up families if there's still a possibility of people getting together. What do you have to say on the fact that, there really are bad men? So let's be honest here also. I mean, it's not like we're misogynist. I mean, we have families and sisters and daughters, and, we want best for them also. For me, my students are very dear to me, and they're someone who I've relate with, some people, that I can really help. And, I think of those young sisters as dearly as I do with my male students. Do you really think that, talking from a female's perspective, from a sister's perspective, what should they be looking into a man if they're looking for a husband who's going to be caring?
Okay. Let me think of how to approach this. Okay, first off, let's say, and Men Hedge Frozen again. I'm not sure if you're going to drop, but first off, men who are bad don't look for help. So bad men, they don't come to guys like you and me and look for consultation. That's the first thing we need to understand. Secondly, when it comes down to women, they really need to rely on a man, and it has to be a man who's not, interested in her. So like for me, for my daughter, I really, women shouldn't be looking for men on their own. I mean, I understand, it happens nowadays. It's a big deal with these apps and whatnot, but in general, they need to have, and this is coming back to the parenting thing. They have men in their lives that are their walis and their wakils that they don't trust. And that's the only reason why a woman would take into her own hands looking for a husband. My daughter's been looking for a husband since she's 16. She's 20 this year. And she hasn't ended up on an app. She doesn't go on apps. She relies on me, and she trusts me with it. And I bring men, and it usually doesn't work out. Because at the end of the day, I don't know, women are women and they do their stuff. And my daughter's no different. My daughter is a woman, and she's affected by the same level of goofy as other women. But whatever the case may be, women need to rely upon the men in their lives to find them men. The thing is, when women say stuff about women, you got to look at it and you got to say, yeah, that's probably mostly true. Not always, but women can recognize women because women know women problems and issues and games. And men are the same way. We can spot bad dudes. We can smell them a mile away. We can smell dudes that are like good or bad or in between. Sometimes it's off, but in general, you get that feeling in your gut and you're just like, it's just something ain't right. And I don't know what it is. And you usually don't ignore that, and especially when it comes down to your family members. So women need the same thing. They need to rely upon a man who can actually identify other men and say, hey, you know what, this guy, you really need to avoid him. Hey, this guy ain't bad. And I had a sister, she's in a local city down here. She asked me to be her wakil. I couldn't be it. She kept on, oh, what about this guy? And I'm just like, don't mess with him. And she married to the guy. She ended up married, divorced like 6 times back to back. And I was like, every single time I said, that guy's no good. 6 times. And like now she's just, she's a revert German, and now she's not covering. She's not practicing because she's just getting messed up. And she keeps on marrying these guys, and I'm like, oh, this guy, he's from Syria and he's religious. He went to religious school, and I'm looking at this guy, and she showed me his picture or whatever else. She sent it to me over WhatsApp. I'm like, don't mess with the guy. I'm telling you, this guy ain't no good. No, marry this guy. But I don't like him because he's too short. Oh, so they got to trust men. And if they don't, if they don't trust, and they gotta put their feelings and their emotions aside. And I know that's rough. That's like telling a man to put his physical desires to the side. And you got super fine, beautiful girl, and you got, she's all right. She's cute girl. And what's he gonna say? Look, don't mess with super fine, beautiful girl. She's gonna mess up your life. I'm telling you, she's gonna mess up your life, dude. And what's he gonna do? They're both available to him. He goes for super fine, pretty girl. And the nice girl that's gonna tie his shoes or whatever else, I had to throw that in there. And is gonna take care of his house really well and take care of him really well and be religious. She gets left to the side, and then pretty cute girl, comes in, wrecks his life. He gets legally married. He falls for all her demands or whatever else she does, and she messes up his life. So it's the same thing for women. They need to trust the men in their lives to find them proper men. Yeah.
I might end up buying that shirt for sure. What about this? What about the advice that you would have to give to boys looking for? So there's someone who's in his 20s, he's in university, or have decent job. What do you have for him? I mean, what should he look for in a girl?
I mean, I wrote an entire 130 pages on this, dude. Where do you start? I wrote 133 vetting guide on this. There's a lot to look out for in this day and age. Look out for just basically stuff that their parents should have done. If she's not covering, these types of things are very open and clear signs. It's my son in the background, guys. Sorry. These are very open these are very basic but open and closed signs that you can spot on a woman right away. That you say, hey, you know what, this is probably a bad idea. Her understanding of religious practicing and how much priority she gives to it over societal movements like feminism or whatnot. Discussing these topics and actually seeing how she deals with them. These types of things you need to be on the lookout for nowadays, because. And I'll give you guys like a heads up to like the vetting guide. You talk about this because feminism is a mentality, it's an ideology, and it can actually override, to the point that it can override biological impulses and imperatives. That's how strong it comes. Where it's like, I hate children, I don't want children. What woman says this? What normal, healthy, physically and psychological woman who's healthy says these types of things? So that's how strong feminism is as an ideology. So if it's gonna help her If feminism is going to aid her and assist her in overwriting and overriding her biological imperatives, how much more so when it comes down to Islam? If you can override a person's biology, you don't think you can override their Islamic ideology and mentality? Absolutely. So look out for these types of things in women nowadays, because if you can't find somebody who's free of this ideology, how are you going to find someone who's going to practice the religion whatsoever? I met a sister, she was out of London, and it turned out she had a lot of feminist ideologies, to the point where she started making statements of absolute major disbelief, and drop this time. No, I'm back. And current ideas on what's acceptable and what's not, and it was just like, wow, and she didn't miss a beat, that she was actually making, derogatory statements in regards to the messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, and things that should not be said, let alone thought, things that you shouldn't be thinking, let alone saying, so look out for these types of things.
I think that's a very spot on thing that you just said, because there was someone sharing these Twitter photos from these feminists, talking really garbage about Prophet ﷺ marrying mother of believers, Aisha. So it was, they've totally gotten out of their mind, just out of their venom against men or some kind of bitter experiences, which could be, for real, but, venting them out in form of sacrilegious expression is absolutely a red sign. And you see someone talking like this, run away from them if you are in your 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine what they'll do to your kids.
That's for sure, and you're going to lose the custody as well.
Yep.
I can go on, but do you have time? We're almost
I have time.
An hour mark. All right,
I have time.
Because I think that's a fantastic opportunity that we have you, who's gone through all the hoops and come out on the other side of life. And I get a lot of questions that you and Brother Jibril talk about on your show in the group that we have. For now, we have closed it for females because there are a lot of spies hunting us and trying to get the things. But our page is open. We've got like 30,000 people here, and I'm unbelievably shocked that there's so many people who have these questions that you're talking about. For example, we talked about the fact that how we as Muslims are very different, or we have a very different approach to this red pill community. That's totally impermissible in Islam. For example, I read the book by Rollo like a couple of years ago, and I do get it where he's coming from. A lot of psychological underpinnings of how the biological behavior manifests itself in women. But then spinning the plates, what's your take on that?
Okay, I'm going to talk about this, and we'll come into that. In general, anything in terms of the red pill world, or just even I'd say the secular world, we see it like cooking in comparison when it comes to Islam. Now, what does this mean? When it comes to ideology and cooking, this is the relation. If you have a recipe and you want to make a recipe and the contents are haram, then we look to... Sorry, let me start over. We have a recipe and we want to cook it. We look at it, can we use it as it is? Meaning, is it permissible? Grilled chicken stew. Fine. We can get chicken that's halal and we can use that 100%. Then we have a recipe that has haram contents in it. Can we use this recipe but altered? So let's say steak and bacon. So we can actually use this recipe because there's beef bacon, there's turkey bacon. So we can replace the beef bacon, the pig bacon with beef or turkey bacon. So we can adapt this recipe in order to make it permissible to us. Then there's recipes that are just completely haram and we'll never be able to fix. Red wine, it's an integral part of some recipes and there's no way around it. You can't replace it with vinegar. It's not going to work with grape juice. It's never going to taste the same no matter what you try and do. And so we have to abandon that altogether. Red pill ideology is the same. Whatever's permissible, we take directly. Whatever is impermissible, we adopt. If it cannot be adopted, then we abandon it. So this is the Muslim, inshallah, approach to anything in the dunya, but especially red pill. Can we take it? Yes, we take it. Can it be, if does it have haram in it? Can we adopt it? No? Okay, then we leave it. If we can adopt it, then we adapt it to what's permissible. So in terms of like, spinning plates and all these types of things, there are a degree of ways to permissibly do this. It is okay for a man to look for multiple wives at once. So he has multiple options, as long as it doesn't exceed, something ridiculous like what you can actually marry. I wouldn't even say that, because it's not even clear if you're going to marry all these women. You might have like 12 women that are interested in marrying you, and maybe 2 are really realistically going to work out. Now, we understand for women, she can only seriously entertain one man at a time. Now, as a man, you obviously, as a Muslim man, don't go around like seriously entertaining 12 women, because you can't do it. It's impossible, because if you're serious, you can only marry 4. So that's why I said don't exceed it. But if you're just generally looking for a wife and you're just going around asking around and you've got like several options, to where you can start seriously pursuing, then fine. In that sense, plate spinning, yes, adoptable. But in terms of the way the non-Muslims see it, no, absolutely not. It's not permissible. And this is why I came up with the idea of red pill rot, because you cannot spend a lot of time in the red pill / manosphere without running into some sort of ethical and moral decline and degradation. It always happens. I've seen it every single time. There's not a single man that's not affected by it. So limit your contact to the community as best as possible, in my humble opinion, because it will lead you into something that is haram eventually. It's almost like, it's not like feminism. It's different, but there is a rub off on it. If you find a sister spends a lot of time with feminists, she's going to rub off, some of feminist ideology, and it's going to come out in the way she acts and she speaks. And it's the same thing with you in the red pill world. Most of what they're interested in the red pill world is sleeping with women in an impermissible fashion. And that's eventually going to rub off on you some way or another. So yeah, there's limits to what you can actually accept from that community.
I spend a lot of time with talking to a lot of people from all cultures, and Muslims, non-Muslims. I've lived in Europe for a fairly long time, and in those discussions, what have come up is that red pill community in itself, as well as its haram, there are a lot of psychological repercussions of that also. Because what do you think? Once you are in the community and you have lived your lifestyle and you have friends who are part of that community, and after that, if you get married to someone, do you really think that you're going to humanly treat them once you have learned how to spin the plates and the plates are falling off? That would be just another one for you that you see as a possible plate that's falling off at some point when you're bored. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. That's a tough one to call. This goes into individual intention, and that's a difficult one to call. You can't really interpret individual intentions. We have to look at their actions eventually and decide, what it was he was doing when he entered into something. And this is a big problem. People start speculating what is a person's intention in terms of what they're doing and why they're learning something or why they're doing something. If a person's learning game, and he's Muslim, then you can look at his actions and decide where he's going, but you can't look at his intentions and say, hey, he's doing this and he's doing that, because only Allah knows the niyyah of a person. I learned game and I've learned some red pill stuff, but for me, it's in order to be the most attractive man possible to my wives and stay married, and I take that's the purpose between a lot of them. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off here, but I think I have a very good question. I'm glad you brought this up. I think a lot of problems these days, especially in Southeast Asia and these Muslim countries where sexual marketplace is not as liberal as the Western world, men are generally so naive about what's attractive to women, is that they simply fall into marriages like as it's some kind of paradise that you're going to live rest of your life happy, always together. So do you think in what way, and in also a permissible manner, they can learn the game? So because I can tell they're so naive and misguided about what's attractive in a man that it's beyond belief.
Yeah. Me and some brothers at one time, this was almost like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, we wanted to make like a green pill or something like this. We were like, what can we come up with the Islam pill to like help guys learn this stuff? And we just found it to be such a minefield in terms of like, the Islamic community reaction, that we just dropped it all together. And I think everybody who follows me on Twitter sees how, Muslim Twitter actually responds to me. They're insane. They're like rabid, I'm not meaning in an insulting way, but they're like rabid dogs when you like just say something that, did he actually say that? And it's nothing impermissible, but they really lose their minds. No logic, no reason to it. So I mean, learning game and learning, what's attractive to women, man, that's a tough one, bro. Yeah, I don't really have an answer, man. If you're not gonna like study the red pill community and understand the pitfalls of it, and what they are, which takes a strong Islamic foundation, there's really no way unless you have one of those male figures in your life directly. Otherwise, there's no way. You literally need someone who coach it through you. Ideally, your father, But if your father's not one of those guys, if he can't teach you or if he doesn't know himself, because he came up in a different generation, then you're really in a tough zone.
Well,
I mean,
the
a lot of
problem is
guys
that
just don't know.
if you look at the statistics, we are literally living in the world without fathers. So single mothers always get the custody. Plus, if there are fathers, they're so feminized to the point that they are not strong male figures in their family. Plus, generally, if they're living in a single mother household, it's very unlikely that they're going to find a fatherly figure in their community that their mother actually approves of.
Yeah,
And the other tragedy, I might call it, is that things have already changed to the point where marketplace has become more liberal than have perceived them to be. So that means that they have to
yeah,
go out and actively, search for, women. I mean, in universities, that's already happening. So I'm a witness of that. But the problem is that, uh, they don't have this orientation that, they're used to the fact that they're going to have an arranged marriage where, everything things going to be sorted
yeah,
out. Their parents going to get the mahar and, bring the family home, and she's expected to, do the dishes and do the households. And when you talk to these women, all they want to be is a CEO or marketing chief, or, have a career, be a lawyer, doctor, or anything. And a marriage is
yeah,
something that they want to get out of their way so that, their parents are not worried about them anymore. And once they
yeah.
are that, they start showing their true colors. Now, how do you actually get those men who are in their 20s going into a disaster unbeknownst to them, to actually know beforehand what's coming? So they don't actually know the changing landscape.
Yeah, I know. I actually have an answer for this one. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been a huge shift in the marriage market. We're not going to call it the sexual market like red pill, but the marriage market for Muslims. But the two are related because the shift in the sexual market reflects the shift in the Muslim marriage market, and the shift is the same. You have alpha seed and beta need. So basically, when we talk about the two biological phases that a woman goes through, she's looking for the best possible reproductive man, in terms of his genetics and whatnot. And then she also later on wants the best provider. So now women have this bifurcated, this dualistic, biological need built into them, hardwired. And this comes back to biological behaviors and social expressions. So she wants a guy who's as alpha as possible. This is the alpha need. And so, and then there's the beta need, the guy to take care of her and to be lovey-dovey and whatever else,
I'm sorry to
and,
cut you off in between. For people who do not know what alpha or beta is, so if you could just elaborate a little bit on that.
okay. Alpha is like a high value man in terms of like genetics and in terms of dominance. And one thing you have to understand is it comes from the animal kingdom, but we just talk about it. They're just placeholder terms, like Royal Tomasi likes to say, to understand human differences. There are a lot, and I mean, anybody who thinks differently, Allah says in the Quran to like observe the creation if you want to believe. There's a lot of relations. There's a menhej in the way that Allah has created everything. He's given animals two eyes. He's given humans two eyes. He's given animals blood. He's given us blood. He's given them certain behaviors. He's given us certain behaviors. So understand that this is not, an insult or anything that opposes Islam to what I'm talking about. So there are relationships between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom. In terms of polygyny and men wanting multiple women, you find almost the entire animal kingdom, the males generally have herds of females. So anyway, the alpha would be the primary, the top, primary reproductive species. In the animal kingdom, the females only reproduce with the absolute best male. And generally we find this takes place in tournament species. A tournament species is they fight, the males fight, they combat one another, and they show that they're the best or the most attractive or genetically the most attractive. So in terms of fighting in tournament species, you'll find lions. Male lions will fight until he gets the herd of the females. In, let's say, tournament species in terms of like genetics, peacocks. Peacocks will show their feather displays and his will be superior to the females. This would be more beta. So the alpha is the one that the women want to reproduce with. the alpha seed, and literally she wants the strongest, best children, the most healthiest that are most likely to survive. And this is just, it's biological. Even men want this on a biological level, and this is why universally men are generally attracted to the same attributes in women: beauty and youth, thinness, and these types of things that come with, showing symmetry in face, what we call beauty. These are things, they're signs of health, in a woman, and the ability to, reproduce healthy children. Then you have beta need. So the beta would be the one who is there to, like, you find like some species, they'll bring the female gifts, and what he's proving is that he can take care of offspring, and so she'll reproduce with him. If she can't find the alpha in her environment, then she'll take the beta that can bring or provide the most for her and her offspring. So you'll find that species where they bring a lot of gifts, fruit, vegetables, some birds bring flowers, you have the, what are these things called? I forgot what they're called. There's two different types of like apes. You have the chimpanzees and you have the
Baboons.
Bonobos, the bonobo chimps. And the bonobo chimps, the chimpanzees, they go more traditional, like humans, we are a tournament species. And then you have the bonobos, they're more like egalitarian. They'll bring gifts and whatever else and show that he's the most touchy-feely monkey in the tribe. So
I think there are very good studies. Maybe you're familiar with Robert Solopsky. He's worked a lot in Africa and studied bonobos for a long time.
yeah.
So we definitely know that the continuity between humans and animals when it comes to evolutionary psychology is one of the most reproducible evolutionary psychology facts.
So now in humans, we find that women have this also. They want an alpha male. They want a man who's, he's in charge, he's strong, he's the leader of men, he's the man that everybody wants to be. They find this attractive, and this is why generally, this is very subjective also, because an alpha in one environment is not going to be an alpha in another one. The alpha banker who's running the bank, he's the alpha in that environment, and there he's in charge, and he's Mr. Go-Getter, and he's ordering everybody around and barking and making things happen, and the woman will find him attractive in that environment. But then you put that banker in the gym, and he's a little scrawny guy, and then the alpha is the guy who's lifting the most weights, but he might work at the post office. That's not a negative thing, but I'm just saying, it's like, in terms of his positions, in terms of employment, he's in a totally different category. And so in a subjective sense, now he is the alpha guy. Then you'll put both of those guys, the banker and the weightlifter, and you'll put them in, like, stay out of pubs, but we'll put him in a social environment, and there'll be a guy there. He's funny, he's charming, he knows how to play the room, and he's the alpha because he's socially cued in. And this is why I tell guys, be the best that you can be. I tell guys, fight, get your education and your money right, and then learn how to, like, talk to and, be good with people. Now you meet all of the alpha in terms of contextual alphas in every environment. You have a general overall, positive in all environments. And if you can do that, you might think, oh, I'm not really good at anything. No. Because cumulatively, you're going to be the top dog in almost everything. You go into one environment, maybe you're not the manager, but you're pretty high up. You go into the gym, maybe you're not the biggest guy, but you're lifting heavy weights and you look really good. You go into, a social environment, maybe you're not like the funniest guy there, but people look to you, for like jokes and funny, whatever else, or like, oh, what's he going to say? This funny guy, he's the funniest guy, said something. What do you think? So you want to be the best in all environments, and that's going to be better than most men in the world. So that's what women want nowadays. They want that guy because the beta need the guy who's going to take care of them and pay, and whatever else, and, cover all their costs. Although they do want that, they want it later in life. They don't want it early in life right now. Now they want a career, and they can actually achieve a career that's either better or at least equal to that of a man. So now the beta need has been removed. So what's that left with? Alpha seed. So you need to be able to fill both shoes, because if you're being the best that you can be, you fill the beta need side of the game. And if you're lifting, you're fighting, you got your confidence, competence, and social competency down on lock, social acumen. Well, now you're the perfect guy. And as long as you stay that guy, you're going to be that perfect guy through all stages of your life. So generally, this is what you need to be as a man. That's how you find women.
It's really interesting that, these days, if you look at the media, they have exactly the portrayal of you just described. So they have relationships, and then women feel a little bit bored because their husbands are already working, so they're not charming, so they don't lift anything, and then find someone in the parking lot or a driver or something, and get into a haram relationship, and that's being shown on Muslim TV in an Islamic
Wow.
country, which is crazy. But the fact is that I want to connect it to your point that these are things that people naively think are not important, and especially these feminists. Once they go beyond a certain age where they're not attractive anymore, so all they have to brag about is their careers, which frankly is
Yeah.
not very attractive to any beta. Or let's say even alphas. So all we are left with is alphas. And can you imagine what would happen that if you only had alphas and women who are in a knowledge economy system who has the money to support for themselves? So the beta is out. So what is going to happen with alphas and those women?
Well, the thing, and this is why I say all men need to like work on themselves universally in terms of like, all their capabilities and capacities and being the best possible man he can be. The simple fact of the matter is, if you are born as a man, the capacity or the ability to be alpha is within you simply from being, a man that produces testosterone. So it's a matter of a choice. And then once you make that choice and you start making those moves, ignore social, degradation and mockery of what you're doing. Because they say, oh, you're such a macho guy. You're a lunkhead. You're at the gym. Oh, you're boxing. You're a knucklehead. Okay, fine. Whatever. Because the reality is, in secret, they're like, oh my gosh, he's so attractive, So, no,
Exactly.
it's true. I get a lot of attacks on Twitter, and then they're in the inbox. Hey, you looking for wife number 3? I'm like, girl, didn't you just insult me on Twitter? I'm like, what is this? Is this a game? And then it turns
Man,
out it's actually not a
you're gonna
game. They're
write
actually interested.
a book about that.
So, they can say what they want. The reality is that this is something they find attractive, and this is what they're going to find attractive. You can say other things are attractive all you want. That doesn't make it attractive. Just like feminists like to write, the big fat feminists, they write on them, this is beauty, whatever else, and they're huge, nasty, cellulite covered women. And it's like, you can say all you want. It's not attractive. And it's the same thing that applies to men. We men understand that the burden of performance is on us. There's no easy way around all of this. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to be good at what you do in terms of your career. You're going to have to be good physically. You're going to have to be good socially. It's a bunch of work, and it never ends. I have a one-to-one consultation that I've had with a guy. I've been talking to him for years, and he's like, dude, does this ever end? I'm like, no, you don't get a break. You don't get a day off. So, and that's part of being a man. You don't
It's
expect
very
it.
important. Yes.
Yeah.
So
So yeah.
the good thing about you is that, and I've heard a lot of the conversation between you and Brother Jibrail, and in my own experience also, is that we do not only talk about women and feminism and our bad experiences or where the world is going, because it sounds all depressive. The good part of us is that a lot of people are looking for male role models. If that's not in their family, they're going out on the internet, they're talking to people, and that's a very
Yeah.
encouraging and promising thing. That people are reaching out to me, that how do I manage my finances? What do I do about my health? So they're curious about the things. Because a lot of narrative that we hear these days in schools and education is to tell men that they're doing something wrong if they're displaying their masculinity. That means that
Yeah.
if they're aggressive, they're doing something bad. Because and that's almost natural to men. So imagine if you have 17 times more testosterone than women, what are you going to do? Just sit there and fight against that? So I want you to give some of the practical advices to someone who's in his 20s. Things that we do not teach in school anymore, like how to manage your finances, how to search for a job or learn a trade, or talk to men or women equally good, how to develop social skills. So I want to give them some practical advice, and I don't want it to be a show where we only talk about the kind of venting out channel for our experiences. We want to give them something solid. So what do you have to say against about some of the skills that men can develop in their 20s?
Work ethic, predominantly work ethic. Whether you're going to trade school or university, and as we know, you guys don't shy away from trade schools either. Trades, a lot of trades, they make up more money than actual people who've been to university. And we were just talking about this, me and Gabriel, like a guy who studies HVAC, does 2 years of HVAC, and he actually goes, he's making more by the time a doctor graduates. He's making more money than him learning HVAC. So I mean,
That's
guys,
true.
don't shy away from trades. I don't know how it is in Pakistan and whatnot, but out here in the West, man, trades are a huge thing. I'm working in a trade field. I didn't learn any of this stuff, and it's
The
like
same actually. I mean, there's a research paper on that. That the white collar jobs actually end up making more than those prestige careers like doctors and engineers and
yeah, 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 yeah.
lawyers or anything.
Yeah. So whatever you pick, university or
So there's a
a trade, and yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So
no, no.
whatever you
I was
pick,
just
make.
waiting for you to get.
Oh, okay. So whatever you pick, make sure you have a very strong work ethic, and this is the first thing that you need to, you need to develop in your 20s is just, this mentality of always learning more, always doing your best, and just doing it even if you don't want to. A lot of times, I think what happens is, especially in the West, I'm not sure about out east and in Pakistan and whatnot, but our kids grow up, they're playing video games, whatever else. They go to school, they come home to play video games, and then they go into the work world and environment with that same mentality, and you can't. You can't take that whole I'm going to go to work then come home and start playing video games. You need to be on constant self-improvement, and then maybe you can let off the gas like by the time you're 30. But in your early to mid 20s at least, you need to be constantly looking at improving yourself in all ways. On the way home from work, stop at the gym, go home, see what you can think about in terms of your day. I do this right now, and I'm 48. What did I do today that I can improve tomorrow, or work on your side hustle and whatever else? I mean, I'm literally here today. That's almost why I forgot this show, is I was researching like something that, I've never done before. I'm working in crypto now, and it's like, the amount of information I had to learn is unbelievable. But what I learned in the past 2 days alone is ridiculous. I mean, I can literally do a lot more in the past 2 days than I ever thought I'd be able to just a week ago. So always be looking for self-improvement. And then everything else is going to come kind of easier. Because if you come with that mentality, then you can actually work and study. Even if part-time, full-time would be cool too, if you can do it, But I mean, if not, you can work part-time. And these other things like getting married, guys want to get married early, whatever else, all this stuff comes a little bit simpler and a little bit easier because you have the work ethic and mentality behind it. Because once you get married, nothing gets easier. What happens, and I tell guys all the time, more wives equals less time and less money. So get ready for it. This is mostly what guys want to know about, and that's the only reason why I'm bringing it up when we in terms of like
Exactly.
life and whatnot.
This is why
It's all connected. Yeah.
this is why
So
I
you
wanted
got
to
to be
ask
ready.
you that the people generally think that women are like the end goal, and that's something you should strive for. I mean, no, it's just a byproduct. If
Yeah.
you are fair enough, you don't have to go anywhere. They're going to jump hoops to get to you.
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, that's what I'd say.
How was your childhood
Yeah.
like, by the way?
Man. My childhood was kind of wild, man. I don't even know where to start with that. My dad, he was an interesting dude. My dad is he's a hard worker guy. He's a hard working guy. He's very skilled, very knowledgeable in multiple areas, and he actually passed that on to me. I can fix almost anything. He's taught me, not to fear, taking something apart and putting it back together, irrespective of how complicated it was. He was an ejection seat specialist on fighter planes. And so for him, taking apart a stereo or something like this or a computer, when you're dealing with ejection seats that, a person's life depends on, it was nothing. So I kind of picked that up from him. But at the same time, my father was ultra blue pill, and he still is to this day, actually. I love him to death, but, he's just got real strong blue pill mentality and behaviors. So, to actually, yeah, it's complicated. It's not really a reflection of who I've become. My dad and I, we argue to this day about that. He's like, "Oh, you're such a misogynist," and I'm like, "Yeah, really." I'm like, "Well, then,
How did it happen?
yeah, Facebook." I'm not on Facebook much anymore, so I used to post stuff on Facebook just like I did on Twitter, and he'd be like, "Ah, you're a misogynist," and we'd argue and fight back and forth. And I mean, he would get pretty intense. He'd get pretty mad, and then being me, I love my dad to death. Don't misunderstand me, but I'll throw barbs at him real quick. I'm like, "Oh yeah, how's that working out for you in your marriages then, huh?" Because he's always getting thrown under the bus by women. It gets constantly more expensive and terrible the older you get, because it's harder to recover the older you get. I mean, he's almost 70 and he's like, he's really struggling. I'm like, dude, how many times are you gonna start over? You just need to listen to me and I'll get you set. It's really.
How did you turn out to be? How did you turn out to be so red pilled? Especially with living in that household.
Just seeing something was wrong. I got a very, very strong sense of intuition, and a gut feeling that I can smell when something's off. I can tell about people's personalities in general when something's off, whatever else. And so entire social movements and ideas, I can even, it's the same thing. So I knew intrinsically something was not right, and I could just be like, I heard you say this, Pops, but it just don't sound right, because what I'm seeing and what you're saying isn't matching up. And so I had a lot of that.
And how come did you end up in Germany?
Military. Sorry, I was reading a question here. I was
Okay.
like, what? Yeah, I was
Sure,
reading a question in the chat.
we should probably
It
take
says,
questions also. I mean, we're just kind of
yeah,
lost.
sorry. Yeah, guys, ask questions now. Person, I don't go to any parties. Well, parties? Do you go to my parties often? When have nobody seen me at a party since I was like 19? I haven't been to a party since I was 19. So I don't know. Yeah. You're dreaming about me. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, let me write this now. Questions now, guys. Yeah, ask questions.
Are
Yeah,
you posted in Wiesbaden?
no. That, man,
I think
little
that's the
small outposts that are
military.
closed now. What? Oops, my screen disappeared. Where'd it go? No, most of the places I was at, they're closed now. They're no longer military installations. They're now civilian installations run by Germans, in the civilian world. Yeah, these were old bases that used to support, like, the U.S.'s stance against Russia during the Cold War before the wall came down. When the wall came down, everything just started coming down with it, all the military installations and locations. So, yeah.
Very interesting. A friend of mine, her father was actually posted back in those time, the wall's time, in Wiesbaden, and they ended up never going back. And there are a lot of families who chose not to go back. Some of them even after retirement, they just moved to Germany. And I think it's for some reason, I think that it's a better choice for them. I mean, some people just simply don't want to live. I also know. Sorry, I mean, remind me if I'm wrong. You're not allowed to go back to U.S., are you?
I'm allowed to go back to the U.S., but I am on the no-fly list. I made a video about it. I don't know why I'm on the no-fly list to this day. I just stopped caring at this point. I didn't care anymore. Because I no longer have an
Why? I mean,
intention
you
to go
serve in the
back.
military.
Who knows, man? They put people. They got 5-year-olds on the no-fly list, bro. I don't know, man. I think what I think it is at one time there was this white American kid, and he took my name, and it was Abuamerican, and he went to Somalia and he ended up joining Al Shabaab. And I think I'm just guessing here. I'm thinking they just like, okay, Abuamerican. We're gonna put them both on a no-fly list. This is what I'm assuming. But I really don't know, to be honest. I can't tell you. I
Don't you have
asked
the
a
right
few
to
people.
information?
I called. Yeah, apparently you can get the information, but every time I call the U.S., the last time I called was like maybe 2 months ago, and then you get run in a circle, and then they say call at this time or whatever else, and I'm at work or whatever else, and I'm just like, you know what, I don't care. I just stopped caring, man. So I don't know why. And I can go back, but I have to arrange it with Homeland Security that there is a armed air marshal that flies with me. So I have to sit next to him on the airplane.
Oh, that would be a nice conversation.
Yeah, it really would. So Adam says, having not seen any Pelagian brothers be successful, how is it living with multiple places with multiple women? How is it? I mean, that's a very general question, Adam. I mean, I don't know how to explain that. I mean, it's good and it's bad. It depends on how far apart your wives are. And when I was in London, I had a wife in Finsbury Park and I had one in Leytonstone. It was wonderful. I just take, it's like a few stops, like 3 or 4 stops between the two stations, and I go every day. I do like the sunnah. I change at the time of Maghrib. At the time of the sunset prayer, I would go, I'd be with my next wife. So, I mean, it was wonderful. But here now I have one wife in the UAE and I have, my other wife here in Germany with me, which answers this next question. Where do I live? I live in Germany. So I mean, it depends on how it is. I definitely do not like the current setup. Distance marriages, whether single or polygynous, I don't encourage them. So I mean, yeah. Would you say that strict gender segregation is enough to solve most of the problems? No. One of the biggest problems that we find in nowadays is social media. It's not gender segregation, it's social media. Social media is one of the biggest problems that you find in marriages to this day. It's just too much access to too much information and too many people, especially on the female side of the game. And what you have to understand is What is pornography to men is social media to women. So that's the equivalent for women. So what you find is there's a stigma behind pornography. I don't know too many places you can go and you can just like surf pornography openly, whatever else, and and talk about it, and everybody's cool with it, unless it's like a closed community. But in general, in wider society, if you went to the shopping center and you had pornography on your phone and you were playing it and watching it, people would really get on you about it. You'd probably get the cops called on you, security or whatever else. But for social media, there's no such attached stigma to women, but it has the similar effect on women that pornography has on men, which is all negative. And don't surf porn, guys, just to be clear, because people like to put words into my mouth and, say stupid stuff. Oh, Americans said surf porn. People are really goofy. No, it's haram. Don't do it. It has negative effects on you. To the non-Muslims watching this, even if it's not haram to you, don't watch it. It's just bad for you all around. And so the same thing applies to social media. So you can segregate the men and the women, but then they have access to social media and there's no stigma attached to it, but it's having the same negative impact on women like pornography is on men. And it's unfiltered for women. And we see this in the West with OnlyFans. Look how many women are on OnlyFans. Try and find you a wife as a non-Muslim guy that doesn't have an OnlyFans account. In the proper understanding of the Aqidah, good luck with that. Is this really what you're going to marry? And this is what happens. They get addicted to tension, male attention, and then they go to extremes to get it. Just like men, they get addicted to female variety and they go to extremes to get it, in terms of pornography. So it's the same thing. So segregation is not going to save anything. Now it's a matter of social media. This story, person, I've talked to you for a long time. I thought I told you this story. The UK wouldn't renew my visa, so I just went to Germany. I tried to stay. I stayed there 16 months. When it was time to renew my visa, they wouldn't approve it. It was right around Brexit time also. And so I think they were getting like cancel happy because a lot of people were having problems and they just like, we're not going to renew you. So I just went to Germany where I knew they would renew me. So, yeah.
I think you're stuck there in Germany also, no?
I'm not stuck. I mean, I can leave anytime I want. It's good right now, so yeah.
I was talking something about, renewing your visa. It's not still here.
Oh yeah, it's done. It's done. I had an agent and she was giving me a hard time. She really hated me and I don't know why. I hired a lawyer and it's called a Dienstbeschwerde, like
Yeah, service authority.
basically a complaint against the my agent, and I got a new agent. And when I came in, they had everything ready. It was crazy because usually you got to sit there and wait. I came in and she was in the hallway. I didn't even go into her office. She was like, "Here's your cards, pay this money." And I was just like, "Why are we doing this in the hallway?" They were scared. They had two people with her at all times, And I'm very polite, but I guess there's always a big black guy, But I'm always very polite. And even to the lady, I was very polite to her, and I walked out of the office, and I guarantee you, she didn't see the letters and the calls from the lawyer coming because she's like, "Oh, this guy's too nice." And this is what goes back to what I was saying about like your children in schools, be polite but firm. I was polite but firm with her, but some women are just going to resist. I was like, okay, fine. We'll see who's going to win this one. So I went and got a lawyer. I just lawyered up and boom. And I got a new agent and they were terrified. They were just like, "Get this guy out of the office." So they gave me my cards, everything. Yeah. And so I got my visa.
Generally does happen. I do remember a time there, when it was time for renewal or visa, they would make your life hell. Sometimes you have to wait, you have to line up for the offices and, the German bureaucracy.
Yeah. So I got it. I just lawyered up. Free mixing. How much is too much of American? Too much is in terms of the Sunnah, man. The book and the Sunnah dictate what is too much. How much is it too much in terms of Islam? All of it. So yeah, but the reality is, if you're working in the West, you're not going to end up working in an environment that's entirely female free. It's not. It's impossible in general. At some point you're going to come across or come in contact or have to work with women. So, I mean, if you talk about that aspect in terms of living with the West, and this is why I said at the beginning of the broadcast, it's best if you work for yourself, because Islamically, if you're going to be an Islamically practicing person in the West, and I said this early on in this live, that you need to be self-employed as best as possible, or as self-employed as much as possible, because it's just going to be difficult to practice your Islam out here in general. I just talked about it in relation to the Salah, but in terms of stuff like this too, and free mixing, women expecting you to shake their hands or whatever else, and give you gifts on Christmas and all these types of things that you're not going to do. All these types of things is just going to be problematic. They just culturally cannot understand that you're not taking on their practices or their ideas that are socially considered widely accepted here, like shaking hands. Coming back to that, so how much mixing is too much? Is all of it. This is a question for you, bro.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Has Southeast Asia gotten worse in recent years with feminism? Well, certainly from my experience. Well, let's deconstruct the argument in terms of what do you mean by worse. Now, if you mean worse in terms of the fact that women are becoming in charge of positions and are impacting work lives for the worst of worse in terms of family and personal lives, definitely. We have a left wing um, tyrannical rule coming to universities and education in schools in general. We had this huge issue. I mean, if you might remember from it was like a month ago, where they showed the textbooks from high school, and there was seriously objectionable content in that. So the two women, it was written in the book, the two women, or like children, they at night they went to the bedroom and they shut down the door. They undressed themselves. They were sleeping in the same bed, two females, and we know for sure that is absolutely not permissible in Islam, let alone women. And for this material to creep into a textbook, you really have to jump hoops and bring on explanations far from the left field to get it published. And that director of the education department got fired because he actually put that material out on the TV. And so this is the kind of era that we're dealing at the moment, where these ideologies are being sponsored by the state onto the TV in an Islamic country. So if that's not enough proof of the fact that Southeast Asia things are getting worse, I was looking at this Instagram page. I think many of you know about that. It's called Anti-Feminist India, and the situation is
Hmm.
worse off in India. There's a lot of child custody issues. Then there are divorce scenarios in which men end up losing everything, including their businesses. And this channel is very active. There are a lot of people who are following them. So it's not only Pakistan or Muslim dominant countries that are being affected by this onslaught of enforced feminism that we are experiencing, but it's also like India. I mean, I can tell you about Malaysia and Indonesia also, where their laws are being enacted in which legal system actually promotes women behaving bad. So small little thing happens in their life. For example, you didn't get me a necklace. Okay, I want a divorce. So I want to work. If you don't allow me to work, I want a divorce. And we all know that how it works when it comes to divorce with split settlement and child custody and alimony and so many things. By default, men are already guilty. So it's just not the opposite, which is innocent unless proven guilty. It's guilty unless proven innocent. So I wouldn't think that it's gotten better for sure, and there's ample evidence that things have gotten worse. Now, there's one thing on the optimistic side. So I am being someone who do not particularly enjoy taking sides. I want to talk about things that are truth and that I have observed. I think there is a lot of oppression against women also, especially in uneducated families, in the way that they got beaten or they got married off to men that they don't want to get married. In some regards, it has gotten better, but um, well, let's say that the divorce laws and the liberalization of that wasn't worth it. So it has caused a lot of family breakups. Every month, there's thousands and thousands of divorce cases in bigger cities like Lahore and Karachi. I mean, I can only speak for Pakistan. I do not have statistics for whole Southeast Asia. And it's happening with a very rapid speed. And that's being glorified by feminist media in Pakistan. And a lot of politicians are backing them, which is very alarming. So, like I said, we've been talking about what to do against that, and Abuamerican has a very good grasp on these ideas, and he's been through that. And you should probably listen carefully to him and watch his other videos also on what we can actually do to curtail that.
I don't know. Soleil asked, but India has 1% divorce rates officially. Is not true. I don't know if that's true or not. So I
I
don't
wouldn't
know.
believe that, no. I mean,
What else we
certainly
got?
not from what I have heard. I mean, that's
Yeah, I
possible in the
don't know.
sense that there are a lot of people don't, there's kind of a dowry system, and then there are lots of caste issues and embarrassment issues, and it could be in that way. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's becoming popular.
So, Adrian, he says, with giving girls more power over law, also converting law to serve feminine imperatives, I suppose is what you mean. Also, government using mosques to make simps and male slaves generation. Wow. Mashallah, Adrian, I'm an English teacher by trade. You are killing me, bro. Male slaves by generation. How to defend self from these, bro? I'm gonna get a nosebleed. Barakallahu feek. I'm not mocking you, man, but I'm getting conditioning fits as like 11-year English teacher. Slave generation defense. We talked about this earlier, actually, Adrian. He asked me some stuff about this, and I talked about how you resist this stuff in terms of in terms of raising your children, and as you as an individual, just being firm, but polite and cordial, and you have to be like that. You have fixed ethics, virtues, values, and morals, as long as you're not doing anything illegally, in the country that you reside in, or haram first and foremost, stick to your guns and just be polite but firm, and you can manifest that and express that however you want in terms of if people want to resist you. And there's going to be people who want to resist you, but that's part of masculinity. Part of masculinity is what do we know from our ancestors? Going out, exploring, fighting the environment, fighting the creatures in it, and then establishing what he wants in that environment. At one point, there were environments that were hostile to man entirely, from the plants, the animals, to the climate. And what did man do? He forged in, he killed anything that resisted him, or he drove it out, and he built an abode that he could survive in, from the coldest to the warmest to the wettest to the hottest, whatever else. So you have to be the same way socially. Don't be a savage or a barbarian. But, you have to be that way. These are my ethics. These are my virtues. These are my values. They don't harm you. They don't get in your way. They don't change your life, but you are here trying to enforce yours. And this is very good in the age of social justice warriors, is that you can use their entire mentality against them. Why are you trying to impose your lifestyle on me? This is my lifestyle. It doesn't harm you. What happened to live and let live? Throw it back in their face. Be firm, but polite, and that's all you can do, really. Because, unless you want a war with the society, and I'm not advocating that, there's no other way, so. Yeah,
I think there's something the brother alluded in the question, which I think is very alarming trend, which is that Muslim clergy has a lot of blood on their conscience when it comes to supporting feminism. There are a lot of fatwas that are being sold literally to whoever is the highest bidder. And that is something I can only say for Pakistan, that they've helped pass a lot of laws that has nothing to do with Islam. For example, if I remember correctly, you're probably more knowledgeable than I am about the fact that the custody should reside with men after a child is 7 years old.
Yes,
and that almost never happened in Pakistani legal system. So we have got a group calling, that there's a whole group of fathers who are fighting for custody in our courts for most of their lives, even when the children are like 14 or university going, because they simply have to pay, but they cannot actually have the custody or even the equal custody. So they're allowed to take their children on festivals and Eid and things like this, but there's no concept of shared custody like 50% or anything like that. And that's a huge embarrassment, and that's based off of a lot of those clerical people who just gave into the greed. And I think that's very sad, because I don't want to point fingers at anyone, but I think that was something that we blame and the Jewish clergy and the Christian clergy of supporting the kings while taking all kind of gifts in exchange for that. And it's so sad that Muslim clergy in some ways is contributing to that ideal.
Yeah, this is a big problem. This is my problem on Twitter. You find that the feminized Muslim, for lack of a better term, they're very aggressive and hostile. I always say that this is my favorite term. I like to say, or statement, is we have Muslims who are passionate about Islam, passionate and emotional about Islam, but are ignorant of it. So they don't know Islam, but then they're passionate and emotional about it. And so they can disagree and yell and scream and holler, but they can't tell you why they're disagreeing and yelling and hollering and screaming. And then when you give them proof, when you give them evidence that goes against what they traditionally think they know, and it's uncomfortable, oh man, it doesn't help. Then I actually try and avoid this because I don't want to, basically, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to feed them into making statements of disbelief. I'll give you an example. And although this may not go into the area of disbelief, you can pick areas that would, similarly go there. So it's an unknown fact, and I'm not advocating that you do this, but it's an unknown fact. No, let me tell the whole story. My wife, she dyed her hair a different color. And before she did that, she bleached her hair. And I didn't know this makes the hair dry and brittle. And when it's dry and brittle, it sticks together and it knots up very easily. So she has a very special routine that she follows in terms of conditioner and washing, all this stuff. And she kept on asking me to get it. And I was just like, yeah, I'll get it. Or I was like, yeah, I'm not going to the store. I'll take you to the store. And then I come home from work. I'm tired. It's late or whatever else. And we just ended up not going. But I was like, I'm not going to the store. I'm not, looking for this stuff. And it's not because it's woman stuff and I'm so masculine, macho, or whatever else. It had nothing to do with that. It's just, if you see how much junk she buys, I'm not going in the store looking for 18 bottles of shampoo and conditioner, and then bringing home 18 bottles and 7 of them are wrong. I'm just not doing it. I'm not going to do it. So anyway, we ended up having to cut her hair. She had very long hair, and we ended up having to cut it like halfway off. It was like, it was above shoulder length. And I was like, ooh, I was like, that's bad. But I didn't know it was that serious. I really didn't. I honestly did. So I put a picture of the clumped up hair that we had cut off, and I said, guys, when she tells you she needs conditioner, it's important. It's more important than we know. And I accept now that it's more important, than I actually knew. I accept that. But Twitter took it as like, oh, he's being a misogynist, this, that, the other, and he's financially abusing her or whatnot, and they really lost their minds. I mean, they really went crazy on me, but they missed the point. So anyway, I just decided to not back down, and I said, okay, I'm going to stick to my guns on this. And so I showed them a fatwa. You can find this in Fatwa Islamiyah, and even Shafi'i, Imam Shafi'i showed it, that you are not obligated to do anything other than food, clothing, and housing for your wife Islamically. And he even said, if she needs medical care, that's an extra. You don't even have to give her medical care, and you can find it in Fatwa Islamiyah. Now, I'm not saying don't take your wife to the hospital if she needs care. Take your wife to the hospital. Don't be a sack of dirt, guys. Take your wife to the hospital if she's sick. But Islamically, understand there's no obligation for you to do it. And so I started presenting with that, and they just couldn't accept it. They couldn't accept that the ulama of our time, Uthaymeen's name's on it. It's in Fatwa Islamiyah. You can find it. It's from Dar es Salaam. You can find it in there. And then Imam Shafi'i even said it, and they just couldn't believe it. And so I'm like, yeah, here you are, people who are emotional and passionate about something, and you're totally ignorant of the rulings. And so how much less so would shampoo be? If I don't have to take her to the hospital and she's bleeding out of her gut or whatever else, or, shot in the arm, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up here. Then what about shampoo and conditioner? 18 different brands that she needs to, make her hair right after she bleached it. And I never told her to do that. So, but, so I try not to bring up these conversations to these people, because if you come into matters of creed and menhaj, it can actually lead them into disbelief, because they actually are just ignorant of Islam to the point that they're so emotional in this feminist and feminized ideology that they don't even remember their religion anymore, or they don't think to study their religion to understand, is the point that is this hill that I'm battling on, is it actually correct from an Islamic standpoint? Do you want to buy your wife conditioner? Absolutely. Are you obligated to? Absolutely not. So I mean, so
there's another question, that stems from that, which is a very important one, and especially, that happens into a lot of discussions before marriage, which is what is an appropriate amount of financial care that's a woman, because, can you hear me?
Yeah, you were chopping up, but I got financial care, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so what I was asking is that, there's a lot of discussion around the fact that, hey, you're too young, you're just a university student, how are you going to be able to afford a wife, if you were to marry right now? And I think a lot of those expectations or standards that society has built for what it costs to have a wife is totally baloney.
Yeah. I would agree. There's a lot of different statements from the ulama on this that you shouldn't take a woman below her current economic status, and put her in one that she's not accustomed to in terms of being lower. But the reality is, a lot of women also want to marry guys. They're not in the position, the guys that they want, they're not in the economic position to treat them the way that their fathers treat them. Her father is like 50 something years old, maybe. Let's just say the average guy is going to be 50 years old. She's trying to get married. He's had 50 years, well, not an entire 50 years, but he's had his entire life to build up his economic position and give her the life that she has. Now she wants to marry a guy her age, like 20 something years old. Oh, he doesn't have a BMW. My dad does. He doesn't have a big house. My dad does. Yeah, your dad's been on the work market for 30 years, 35 years longer than him. So let's be a little bit realistic here. But there's no realism in the ummah these days. Now they're all just crazy. You should be 24 millionaire with like 5 cars and 2 houses and 6 businesses. And it's like, yeah, when did you do this? The guy just graduated like 6 years ago. How you know what I mean? Even if he studied medicine, he still got 2 more years to go before he can operate on somebody. What are you talking about? So it's just a weird mentality in the ummah nowadays.
Really want a guy who has got a So if you really need a guy who's got a BMW, his own house, couple of businesses, you're not looking for a guy. You're looking for a bald, fat uncle.
Exactly. You're looking for a guy that's older and established. And let's be real. Most women like guys that are slightly older than him, or you have those, sector of women who like significantly older guys, where there's a huge age gap. But generally, yeah. So there's just so much delusion in the ummah right now, and Allahu alam, Allah knows best. Maybe this is part of that hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, the Muslims will follow the non-believers, the non-Muslims, handspan by handspan, until to the point that if one entered in the lizard holes, you'd find the Muslims trying to do the same. This might be part of that. Allah knows best. So
that's for sure. Especially with these days when you look at a lot of Muslims passionately advocating LGBT and other despicable ideologies in the name of Islam. Can you imagine that they've got a Muslim LGBT parade in, what was that, UK?
A Muslim one, really?
Yes, I think I've read about that. I vividly remember that. And there are a lot of NGOs and organizations that passionately support that. And then we have a lot of, you probably heard about Ayaan Ali Hirsi and Ishra Nomani and other feminists, what they're doing in the name of Islam. I don't call Ayaan Ali Hirsi anymore a Muslim feminist. She's just out of the mold already. Have you heard of her?
Ayaan History, yeah.
That's crazy.
You look at her story, and really, she doesn't have a problem with Islam. She has a problem with certain Muslims. Really, when you look, and this is going to make a lot of people mad, but I'm just going to say it. Her entire story is one of messing around with, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and just basically their messed up manhaj and aqidah. And that's what happened to her. If you read her story, you will find that what happened was she started messing with messed up Muslims. And so she started getting a messed up version of Islam. And then she just started blaming Islam for these messed up dudes. And the two are not the same. It's like completely different. So
yeah, I think my experience, I think you're totally right. I think that answers a lot of what I experienced, that a lot of feminists, a lot of ex-Muslims, a lot of so-called liberal Muslims, there's always some bad Muslim or some bad experience that has gotten to the point where they're venting out their anger on Islam and not the right people. Nobody said Muslims are perfect. Islam is.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I don't think we were supposed to be angels. I don't think that was the case. I'm pretty sure there's a hadith that says something along the lines of if you were people who were without sin, then Allah would destroy you all and then replace you with people who did sin, so you'd know His mercy. So that's not an excuse to go sin. Abuamerican is not saying go sin. I know how you guys work on Muslim Twitter. I'm not saying go sin, but the expectation of perfection is also, you're not from the malaika. You're gonna make mistakes. Do your best to do your best, people.
That's for sure. But I think we're holding you for quite long now. Let's call it a day now.
Yeah, it starts in minutes. Oh, it's me now. Yeah, I actually blinked out there. Yeah, it's a lot of times where I got to go. Actually, it's time to pray. So yeah.
All right, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you, and I hope we can, have these shows more regularly. There are plenty of questions that people find very helpful, what you have to say, and a lot of people would certainly enjoy the conversation between you and Brother Jibril also. I think probably we can invite him for a 3-way discussion also at some point. That would be interesting.
We could try it. Let's do it.
Sure, if he's up for it. I mean, I think it's
I'll
already
talk
too
to him
late
about
for
it.
them when you generally have it.
Yeah, we generally we are on Thursdays unless like because he comes on really late. He's in Malaysia, so he usually comes on short, like 12 p.m. his time, and we end the show at 1 a.m. his time. So it's really late for him. But on Thursdays, every Thursday, 5
Yeah, I
p.m.
think
my time.
we're 3. Okay, so we're 3 hours ahead of Malaysia, or no? I think we're 3 hours before Malaysia. So, anyways, 5 p.m. New York time means 8 p.m. my time. So, I mean, that's fair enough.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Shorty, yeah, thank you. Okay, guys. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Jazakallah khair for tuning in. And yeah, stay up, people. You want to say anything, Minhaj?
Thank you so much for being here, and everyone, be a man. Peace out.
Later.